can it give the British pubs the boost that they need?
I'm the MA's Ed Beddington, and this is the Review of the Week. Hello and welcome to the MA's Review of the Week. I'm the Morning Advertiser's Ed Beddington, and with me this morning I have the fantastic Vicky Colclough of Jules Brewery. Good morning, Vicky.
Good morning, Ed.
So, Vicky, I mean, how's things with you? How's business at the moment?
It's positive. Obviously, the great weather in May was really kind of resolving for beer sales, and we are just nudging ahead of budgets this year. So, a good place to be, but conscious about the challenges we're facing in the trade for the rest of the year.
Yeah, no, it's never easy, is it? But we're here to talk about the week's news. I mean, what's caught your eye over the last week?
I think it's the undeniable, every 4 years it comes around, and every 4 years we, call it the golden period for operators across the country. The World Cup has returned, and I think it's really interesting to look at it, obviously with the press coverage. Can it give the British pubs the boost that they need? Everyone's talking about it, and, how do we maximise that? Many operators are viewing it and kind of worried about negative press coverage, but the research is suggesting that nearly 10 million Brits are going to head to the pubs to celebrate one of the events over the next 30 days. So it's more than selling a few extra pints. I actually think it's, seizing the day and creating new customers, retaining them and bringing them forward. And, how are pubs going to do that, and how are they also going to combat it if they aren't using live sport as something that they do day to day? Some of the pubs approach it in a different way and actually create havens from the tournament and benefit from that in different ways. So it's a really interesting summer, and it's obviously something that people are very excited to tackle. But I think the winners of this summer will be, it's not measured on television size in beer gardens. It'll be very much measured on how do you get those customers to interact with your kind of ranges that you're pushing, big team training, big successes there. And then obviously it's the retention of new customers and new faces for the future rather than just one summer.
Yes, yeah. So it's an opportunity to showcase, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it's always great to bring new faces to pubs and kind of remind them what it's all about. And community engagement is fundamentally what we believe in pubs. So a really great summer. Hopefully the weather will hold off, but, a positive news story for us to tackle.
Absolutely. And speaking of positive news stories, we had a nice message from our beloved Chancellor of the Exchequer this week. What was your take on Rachel Reeves' uplifting and inspiring speech at the UK conference?
It's always nice to have the acknowledgement of, the challenges that hospitality has endured. But I think, we've spoken about growth and investment, but for many pubs and breweries facing it, yesterday's announcement contained very little that will materially change, the challenges that we face. That's what many operators I'm finding, particularly in our pub estate, and people that I talk to are finding very frustrating. The sector's challenges are widely recognised, with frequent discussion and often sympathised with, yet meaningful solutions, they're kind of remaining out of reach at the moment. And don't get me wrong, it's positive that hospitality is being recognised and it's, an important sector, but most operators that I know, most of our tenants were looking for something much more tangible. I really believe that the challenge isn't understanding the problem. The challenge is finding the relief from it. And we've had, modest support from the government. But as you know, over the last 15 years, hospitality has faced layer upon layer of additional cost and taxation. And we've seen increases in duty. I don't have to go through it with you, Ed, NI, minimum wage, utilities, insurance, suppliers costs. Where does that end? At the same time, forecasts suggest that around 4 pubs a day are going to close. And the government rightly talks about growth, investment and job creation. Hospitality is one of the UK's biggest employers, and it's a vital contributor to the local economies. And if businesses are expected to invest, employ people and expand, there needs to be an operating environment that supports those ambitions. And that's why, campaigns such as That's the Problem continue to gather momentum. But what's particularly striking is that the demand isn't necessarily the issue. I don't think it's a turnover problem in some of these pubs. People still want to go to pubs. They're still in the British hearts and souls. Most operators will tell you that they're serving customers and generating footfall. The challenge is what's left after the bills are paid. And it isn't just small pubs in, town high streets or in the corners of wide spaces in England. It's struggling from the top to the bottom of scale of turnover. And the story of the last 4 years in particular is that, cost post-COVID and And we've been just tackling and learning to pull more efficiency out of our businesses wherever possible. And even, you know, when moderate price increases have had to come through, which have been necessary to protect margin, customers are understandably becoming more and more focused on value and affordability in the same way. So as a result, the conversation has very much shifted. And sadly, in some cases, it's no longer a conversation about profitability. And, you know, we're seeing conversations rise now where it's about viability for businesses. And, you know, there comes a point where it's got to stop. And that's why value remains so important throughout the supply chain in our industry. You know, brewers, pub operators, suppliers, we're all interconnected. And we all have a role to play in helping this sector remain sustainable. But I feel like we're doing that. And I feel like we're consciously talking about all the efforts that we're tackling to do this. And I feel like the majority are doing their part. But there's only so much that we can control without it being constantly changed. And I think it's good for us to remember that the industry isn't asking for sympathy. It's asking for conditions that allow businesses to invest in their sites, employ people, support communities and grow. You know, I know our tenants and managers feel that they're being encouraged to expand with one hand and being taxed more heavily with the other. So ultimately, we're not short of customers. We're short on margin. And, you know, you look at the press and then frustratingly you read through and, you know, tenants are becoming more vocal and people are, you know, signing up to petitions and raising awareness, which is fantastic. And our industry has always done that, which is so, you know, heartening to see. But then frustratingly, I've seen commentary suggesting on the flip side that support for hospitality would be amounting to subsidising leisure spending. And I think that, you know, that just overlooks the broader value pubs bring to this country. You know, pubs create jobs, they support local communities. They're often people's first job into the working world as well. You know, what a learning curve. We drive tourism, we raise money for charities. You know, you've spoken about local equity and things. And they provide community spaces and social connections in towns and villages across the UK. So this, for me, isn't about subsidising a night out. And when I saw that kind of retort, I was fuming. It's about creating conditions that allow these benefits to continue for future generations. You know, they're public houses for a reason.
It's we're not asking for handouts. This is the biggest frustration. We're just asking for a level playing field to create an environment in which we can survive. I mean, it's not
social
even
equity, not equality.
To say it's subsidising people going, no, I mean, it's completely missing the point.
Yeah, completely. And I think, you know, seeing that as one of the headlines in the news this week, I was just really shocked. And, you know, we face so much. And then to see it's kind of like a handout was just really disheartening. But no, it's great to see the kind of rallying around and challenging against the government on this at the moment. But it needs to continue and we need to speak more loudly.
Absolutely. Final thing, we've seen research by Barclays. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I thought, you know, a positive news spin, you know, off the back of all those challenges we face, it's easier to focus on challenges, isn't it? So I thought, end on a positive note, Vicky, come on, it's a Friday. And it's still largely positive out there. You know, we're still confident in growing as Jules Brewery. So in the face of these rising tides, I think Barclays released that there's reasons to be optimistic and that 50% of hospitality and operators plan to invest over the next 3 years, which, you know, I think is a remarkable statistic given the pressures businesses are currently facing. The simple reality is to push back, you know, on that doom and gloom in the press. If hospitality were genuinely broken, which some people try and, you know, shadow in the headlines, businesses wouldn't be investing. And across the country, we see new sites refurbishing existing pubs, launching new ones, you know, converting old buildings, reinstating city centres. And it raises quite an interesting challenge, I think, that, you know, people are coming across is, are we witnessing a decline in pubs, or is it just the pub industry evolving again? And the businesses and entrepreneurs and publicans are continuing to back themselves, you know, and the sector recognises long-term value that the hospitality industry provides, and people still place enormous value in quality. You know, people still want to meet their friends, they want to celebrate special occasions, spend quality time with people. Those fundamental human behaviours, they haven't changed. We still believe in the Great British Pub, and that's what remains significant, you know, opportunity for well-run pubs that have learnt these efficiencies. And I think time again, we see pubs thrive when operators focus on what they can control, delivering great service, maintaining quality, creating atmospheres, you know, and investing in that overall customer experience. The most successful businesses are those that stay focused on their customers rather than being consumed by the challenges around them, which is very easy to say, and it's a very hard challenge to deliver, but people are doing it and they're great operators. You know, they need to be recognised, and pubs always have a way of adapting and changing to consumer needs and habits. And in many ways, they were the original social network, gathering paces at the heart of the communities. And long before, you know, the networks of socials that we now see in the digital age today. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, you know, this investment coming through in the next 3 years and how that shapes along the next generation coming through, and their pub use continues to evolve just as it has for centuries before. So today's pubs are, you know, inclusive and community hubs. And I just think it's one of the sector's great strengths is the fact that we continue to grow. In spite of all these challenges, we believe in the pubs and people are ready to invest. So yeah, I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Fantastic. Brilliant. Well, we are out of time, Vicky, but thank you very much for those thoughts.
No, thank you.
Well, there you go. Reasons to be cheerful. Hopefully there is some positivity on the horizon. We will be back next week with some more thoughts on the week's news. Till then, keep pulling those pints.